grew up totally in fear. I didn't know what ADHD was. I didn't know, can you play baseball? Yeah. Football? No. Basketball? No. And at the same time, I kept trying to fake it, put myself forward. I kind of found some new areas of my life that I didn't know I had in me.
Fans never noticed this about Lionel Richie, but Motown insiders have been keeping his biggest secret for over 50 years.
And some of it was so painful I wanted to forget it ever happened, but I survived it.
Lionel was living a lie so elaborate that it involved fake marriages, arranged relationships, and a carefully hidden truth about who he really loved.
I thought my grandmother was actually going to disown me. I thought it was kind of disgraceful myself.
This is the untold story of how America's ultimate romantic leading man became one of music's most protected secrets, and why he's finally ready to break his silence. So, let's get into it. Long before Lionel Richie became one of America's most celebrated romantic voices, he was just a shy kid from Tuskegee, Alabama, trying to figure out where he fit in. Born on June 20th, 1949, to Lionel Brockman Richie Sr. and Alberta Foster, young Lionel grew up in a household where music and faith were inseparable. His father worked as a systems analyst for the Army, while his mother was a school teacher, both respectable professions in the segregated South. But it was his grandfather, a minister, who first exposed him to the emotional power of music through gospel hymns that filled the church every Sunday. Growing up in Tuskegee during the Civil Rights Movement shaped Richie's understanding of performance and presentation. He learned early that survival sometimes meant showing the world what it wanted to see rather than who you really were.
This is more than just the birthplace. We grew up in history. And so things that people are trying to read about, it was every day.
The town itself was a unique environment, home to the prestigious Tuskegee Institute. It offered black families opportunities for education and advancement that were rare in 1950s Alabama. Richie was a quiet child who preferred observation to participation. While other boys played football and talked about girls, young Lionel found himself drawn to the piano in his grandmother's living room, where he would spend hours picking out melodies that somehow captured feelings he couldn't quite express in words. His decision to attend Tuskegee Institute in 1967 seemed natural. It was practically in his backyard, and his family expected him to pursue something practical, like accounting or engineering. But fate and a saxophone had other plans for the young man who would spend the next 5 decades hiding in plain sight. In 1968, a young Lionel Richie picked up a saxophone at Tuskegee Institute, not because he had any musical training, but because he thought it would help him meet girls. The irony of this moment would become apparent decades later, as the instrument that was supposed to enhance his appeal to women actually led him into a world where his relationships with men would define his career more than any romantic connection ever could. Richie's bandmates in what would become the Commodores didn't discover for 2 years that he had absolutely no training on the saxophone, but his charisma and natural musical instincts made up for his technical deficiencies. More importantly, his ability to write romantic ballads that women loved became the group's secret weapon, even though those who knew him best understood that his understanding of love came from a different perspective than most assumed.
Well, let me explain to you what that is. What's that thing called ADD, ADHD?
Yeah.
Well, how I saw notes was because tracking is a part of the reading process. So I couldn't track it properly.
The formation of the Commodores brought together 6 young men who would spend the next 15 years living, traveling, and creating music together in an intimacy that went far beyond typical band dynamics. Walter Orange, Thomas McClary, Milan Williams, William King, Ronald LePred, and Lionel formed bonds that resembled a chosen family more than a business partnership.
It was the silliest thing possible because everyone, of course, as you can imagine, walked in the door with an idea for a song.
for a title of the group. And of course we could not figure it out, and nobody liked the other one. So let's take a dictionary, look in the thing. Well, we had commode, comma, everything close to comma. So it was Michael Gilbert, thank God, he took charge of this thing and said, okay, forget about it. We're the Commodores.
Lionel's role in the group was unique from the beginning. While other members focused on the funk and dance tracks that would make them famous, Richie gravitated toward the tender ballads that required an emotional vulnerability that came naturally to him. Songs like 3 Times a Lady and Easy showcased a sensitivity that set him apart from the more traditionally masculine personas of his bandmates. The group's early success came from opening for the Jackson 5, where they caught the attention of Motown scouts. But even in those early performances, industry insiders noticed something different about Richie's stage presence. He connected with audiences in ways that transcended typical performer-fan relationships, creating an emotional intimacy that felt almost personal. Living on the Tuskegee campus provided a protective bubble where the young men could explore their artistic identities without the scrutiny that would later define their careers. Richie's dormitory room became a gathering place for creative collaboration, where he would spend hours with his bandmates crafting melodies and harmonies that seemed to flow effortlessly from their close relationships. The transition from college performers to professional recording artists would force Richie to navigate a music industry that had very specific expectations about how male performers should present themselves. The romantic crooner image that Motown would eventually build around him was as much a business strategy as it was an artistic choice, designed to appeal to female fans while obscuring the more complex realities of his personal relationships and identity. When the Commodores signed with Motown Records in 1972, they entered a world where image management was just as important as musical talent. Berry Gordy had built his empire on creating artists who could cross over to white audiences, but he had also mastered the art of concealing aspects of his performers' lives that might threaten their commercial appeal. Motown's roster in the 1970s included several artists whose sexuality was an open secret within the industry, but carefully hidden from the public. The label had developed sophisticated systems for managing the personal lives of performers who didn't fit conventional heterosexual expectations, creating fake relationships and carefully orchestrated public appearances to maintain their commercial viability. The Dynamic Superiors, featuring openly gay lead singer Tony Washington, represented Motown's most direct acknowledgement of LGBTQ+ talent. But even their success was carefully contained within the disco market, where gender fluidity was more accepted.
Shoo, shoo, shine, Mr. Corsicana, a penny goodbye.
The label's approach to artists like Lionel Richie required more subtle strategies, since his crossover potential demanded a more traditional romantic image. Richie's early interactions with Berry Gordy revealed the label head's sophisticated understanding of how to position artists for maximum commercial success. Their tennis matches at Gordy's mansion became legendary within Motown circles. But those sessions also provided opportunities for private conversations about image management that would shape Richie's public persona for decades. The company's approach to artist development included detailed coaching on public behavior, interview techniques, and relationship management. For artists whose personal lives complicated their commercial appeal, Motown provided comprehensive support systems that included arranged dates, publicity relationships, and careful media management to maintain the illusions that sold records. Marvin Gaye's struggles with Berry Gordy over creative control often centered on the singer's desire to explore more personal and politically charged material that didn't fit Motown's commercial formulas.
Do you feel freer now that you're not recording for Motown? Do you feel like you have a
If I say yes, that would mean I felt locked up or somehow imprisoned or in bondage or something like that.
Well, not in bondage, but the too much.
Yeah, bondage, we got to watch that word, yes. But Ha ha ha. Yes, I do, frankly.
Similar tensions would later arise with Richie as his success as a songwriter for other artists began to overshadow his role within the Commodores. The label's treatment of Diana Ross provided a template for managing artists whose personal relationships might complicate their public image. Ross's carefully cultivated romantic persona helped sell millions of records while obscuring the more complex realities of her personal life and the strategic nature of her public relationships. By the time Richie began considering a solo career, Motown had perfected the art of creating and maintaining public personas that bore little resemblance to their artists' private realities. The romantic balladeer image that would define his solo success was as much a product of careful marketing as it was a reflection of his musical abilities. Life within the Commodores created an environment where 6 men lived in extraordinary closeness, sharing hotel rooms, tour buses, and creative spaces in ways that fostered relationships deeper than most marriages. For Lionel Richie, this brotherhood provided emotional fulfillment that he struggled to find in traditional romantic relationships. The band's touring schedule meant months spent almost exclusively in each other's company, developing private jokes, shared experiences, and emotional intimacies that outsiders could never fully understand. Richie's closest relationships were with his bandmates, particularly Walter Orange, with whom he shared lead vocal duties and spent countless hours perfecting their harmonies. Behind the scenes, the Commodores functioned like a family unit, with each member playing specific roles that went far beyond their musical contributions. Richie emerged as the emotional center of the group, the one who could smooth over conflicts and maintain the harmony that kept them functioning as a unit. His natural empathy and emotional intelligence made him the confidant for other members' personal struggles. The group's creative process often involved intimate late-night sessions, where Richie would work out melodies on piano, while his bandmates contributed arrangements and suggestions. These collaborations produced their most successful ballads, songs that captured a tenderness and vulnerability that came from their genuine emotional connections with each other.
What is the biggest credit you've gotten in the music business?
Well, I tell you, I think every artist for the first time around always thinks of that platinum and that gold. And the Hot on the Tracks album was platinum and gold, and Just to Be Close was gold.
Richie's songwriting during this period reflected his deep understanding of love and loss. But the inspiration for these romantic ballads came from his observations of relationships rather than his personal experiences. His ability to write convincingly about heterosexual romance while maintaining emotional distance from those experiences became one of his greatest artistic assets. The pressure of constant touring and recording began to create tensions within the group by the late 1970s, as individual members started pursuing outside projects and relationships. For Richie, whose primary emotional investments had been within the band, these changes created anxiety about his future, both professionally and personally. Industry insiders began to notice that Richie's most comfortable relationships were with his bandmates and with other creative collaborators like Kenny Rogers and Diana Ross, rather than with the women he was occasionally linked to romantically. His comfort level with emotional intimacy seemed to be reserved for his professional relationships. The realization that his individual success was beginning to overshadow the group dynamic created guilt and confusion for Richie, who had never imagined pursuing a career outside the brotherhood that had defined his adult life. The decision to leave the Commodores would force him to confront aspects of his identity that had been protected by the group's collective support. When Lionel Richie reluctantly agreed to record a solo album in 1982, Motown's marketing machine went into overdrive to create a romantic leading man who could appeal to female audiences worldwide. The transformation from Commodores member to solo heartthrob required careful orchestration of his public image, including strategic dating arrangements and publicity relationships. The success of Truly, Richie's first solo #1 hit, established him as a romantic balladeer whose appeal transcended racial and demographic boundaries. But the creation of this persona required him to participate in a level of image management that felt increasingly disconnected from his authentic self. Motown's publicity department began arranging appearances with women who could enhance his romantic credibility, including actresses and models who understood their roles in maintaining his commercial appeal. These relationships served their purpose for magazine covers and award show appearances, but industry insiders noticed that Richie seemed more comfortable with his male collaborators and creative partners. The recording process for his solo albums revealed Richie's preference for working with male producers and songwriters who understood his artistic vision.
You know what solo means?
Yeah.
Solo means you get another band.
Mm-hmm.
I already had a band.
Right.
The problem that happened with the Commodores was it was so difficult from a press point of view.
His collaborations with James Anthony Carmichael and other male creatives produced his most successful work, suggesting that his creative inspiration came from these professional relationships rather than the romantic partnerships that allegedly inspired his love songs. Richie's discomfort with traditional masculine expectations became apparent during interviews and public appearances, where he seemed more at ease discussing his creative process than his personal life. His reluctance to engage in typical male bonding activities or discuss romantic conquests created challenges for publicists trying to maintain his heartthrob image. The massive success of Can't Slow Down in 1983 made Richie one of the biggest stars in the world, but it also intensified the pressure to maintain his romantic image.
Stuck on you. I've got this feeling down deep in my soul that I just can't.
The album's love songs convinced millions of fans that they were hearing the intimate thoughts of a passionate romantic, even though those closest to him understood that his inspiration came from very different sources. Behind the scenes, Richie began to struggle with the disconnect between his public persona and his private reality. The constant pressure to maintain romantic relationships for publicity purposes created stress that affected his creative output and personal relationships. His closest friendships remained with men who understood the entertainment industry's demands for image management. The realization that his solo success had trapped him in a persona that felt increasingly inauthentic would become a source of ongoing tension throughout his career.
Maybe I don't know what love is. Maybe I'm a fool.
The romantic balladeer image that sold millions of records also prevented him from exploring more personal or experimental musical directions that might have reflected his true artistic interests. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, Lionel Richie's public relationships followed a pattern that industry insiders recognized as classic Motown image management. His marriages to Brenda Harvey and later Diane Alexander were carefully orchestrated partnerships that served his commercial interests while providing him with the cover he needed to maintain his romantic leading man status. Richie's 18-year marriage to Brenda Harvey began during his Commodores years and provided stability during his transition to solo stardom. But those close to the couple noticed that their relationship functioned more like a business partnership than a passionate romance. Harvey understood her role in maintaining Richie's image and participated willingly in the public performance of their marriage. The adoption of Nicole Richie in 1983 added another layer to their constructed family narrative, providing Richie with the paternal image that enhanced his appeal to female fans. But even this parental relationship seemed more strategic than natural, as if Richie were playing a role that had been carefully scripted by his management team.
You have to decide who's better at trimming bushes
No. I am not going to do that.
And who's a better daughter?
I know that trick.
At least give me like the bush
Just
one.
at least tell us who you were more excited.
When Richie's alleged affair with Diane Alexander became public in 1988, the drama that ensued felt theatrical rather than authentic. Harvey's dramatic confrontation at Alexander's Beverly Hills home, resulting in her arrest on multiple charges, provided exactly the kind of publicity that reinforced Richie's desirability as a romantic figure.
At the time, Brenda was arrested for confronting Diane when she discovered her and Lionel together inside a Beverly Hills.
The incident suggested that women would literally fight over him, enhancing his symbol status. Richie's subsequent divorce from Harvey and marriage to Alexander in 1995 followed the classic pattern of a man leaving his first wife for a younger, more glamorous woman. But industry observers noted that Alexander's background as a dancer and fashion designer made her particularly well-suited to understanding the performance aspects of their relationship. The birth of Miles and Sophia Richie provided additional cover for their father's carefully managed image, creating a picture-perfect family that graced magazine covers and red carpet events. But even casual observers could sense the performative nature of these public appearances, where the family seemed to be posing for cameras rather than enjoying genuine intimate moments.
Very good, guys. Well, okay. How are you doing, so?
My name is Nicole.
Nick, I'm sorry, Nick.
And I'm doing a great job.
Behind the carefully constructed facade, Richie's most meaningful relationships continued to be with his male collaborators and creative partners. His friendships with men like Kenny Rogers, Quincy Jones, and various producers and songwriters provided the emotional intimacy that was missing from his public romantic relationships. The strain of maintaining these elaborate deceptions began to take a toll on Richie's creativity and personal well-being. By the 1990s, his musical output had declined significantly, and those close to him noticed signs of depression and anxiety that seemed connected to the exhausting effort required to maintain his false persona. As Lionel Richie entered the 21st century, his role as a judge on American Idol provided new opportunities for public appearances that revealed subtle changes in his self-presentation. His interactions with contestants and fellow judges suggested someone who was gradually becoming more comfortable with expressing aspects of his personality that had been suppressed during his peak commercial years. Richie's mentoring style on the show reflected a nurturing, emotionally intuitive approach that felt more authentic than his earlier public persona. His ability to connect with young performers struggling with identity issues suggested someone who understood those challenges from personal experience rather than professional observation. In 2024, as Lionel Richie approached his 75th birthday, the weight of maintaining his carefully constructed image for over 50 years had become increasingly difficult to sustain. Industry friends noticed that he was growing tired of the performance that had defined his public life, and began hinting that he was considering greater honesty about his personal experiences. The entertainment landscape had changed dramatically since his peak years, with artists like Frank Ocean, Lil Nas X, and countless others finding commercial success while being open about their. This new environment created possibilities for Richie that simply hadn't existed during his formative career years. Close friends reported that Richie had begun discussing the emotional toll of living behind a false persona for decades, describing the loneliness of being unable to share his authentic self with the fans who had supported his career. The romantic songs that had made him famous felt increasingly hollow when performed for audiences who believed they represented his genuine experiences. His recent comments about the importance of being true to oneself while carefully avoiding explicit revelations suggested someone who was testing the waters for potential greater openness. His references to the courage required for authenticity indicated that he was considering the possibility of finally sharing his truth. Industry insiders began preparing for what they believed might be eventual revelations about Richie's personal life, recognizing that his story could provide important context for understanding the pressures faced by LGBTQ+ performers throughout music history. His experience represented the costs of industry homophobia and the personal sacrifices required to maintain commercial success. The connection between Richie's situation and the broader history of closeted Motown performers created opportunities for important conversations about the entertainment industry's past treatment of LGBTQ+ artists. His story could illuminate the systematic nature of discrimination that forced talented performers to live double lives. Richie's legacy as a performer had already been established, but his potential role as someone who could speak honestly about the hidden costs of fame created possibilities for a different kind of impact. His story could help current and future performers avoid the decades of deception that had defined his experience. Whether Lionel Richie ever chooses to speak openly about his career represents a fascinating case study in how the entertainment industry has historically managed performers whose personal lives didn't match their commercial personas. His experience illuminates the hidden history of LGBTQ+ artists within mainstream popular music and the ongoing evolution toward greater authenticity and acceptance. Anyway, that's it for the video, folks. Bye.